Rembrandt painted the most recognizable faces in the history of Western art. His light, his shadow, unmistakable. And then there is this. A small brown panel. An old man. A beard. Nothing moves. Most visitors give it a few seconds and walk away, which makes it very hard to explain what happened in 2011. That year, this quiet little painting was placed inside a particle accelerator. Yes, a particle accelerator. Sealed beneath the surface, there is something no living person had ever seen. Something Rembrandt put there with his own hands, and then made disappear. And it was facing outward. But to understand what was buried here and why, we have to go back to the very beginning. The painting is called Old Man with a Beard. Rembrandt van Rijn, circa 1630. It currently hangs in the Getty Museum in Los Angeles. At roughly 60 by 50 centimeters, it is smaller than a laptop screen. Look at it, and you see exactly what the title promises. A weathered face. Brown tones layered over brown tones. Deep shadow eating the edges. There is no drama, no grand gesture, no story you can immediately read. Most visitors give it a few seconds. Some give it less. But look at the paint itself. The way it sits heavy on the surface, built up in ridges, almost sculptural. For a painter barely in his 20s, that confidence is unusual. That control is unusual. To understand why and what he was painting over, we need to rewind roughly 400 years to a miller's son in Leiden who was already running out of canvas. 1606, Leiden in the Dutch Republic. Rembrandt Harmenzoon van Rijn is born the 9th child of a miller who works the banks of the Rhine. The city is prosperous, Protestant, and obsessed with commerce. Cloth moves through its canals. Money moves through its guilds. Paintings move through its markets like furniture. He is not supposed to become a painter. He is enrolled at Leiden University at 14, one of the youngest students on record. He lasts less than a year. Something pulls him toward the studio instead, and his parents, to their credit, let it. By his late teens, he is apprenticed to Jacob van Swanenburg in Leiden, then to Peter Lastman in Amsterdam. 6 months that change everything. Lastman paints biblical drama with theatrical light and crowded composition. Rembrandt absorbs it and immediately starts pushing past it. He is back in Leiden by 1625, running his own studio at 19. 19. His early paintings are already strange, psychologically intense in a way that makes his contemporaries look decorative. A contemporary critic, Constantine Huygens, visits the studio and writes that this young man from a mill has a force of expression that surpasses painters twice his age. And then there are the self-portraits. They begin almost immediately, grimacing, startled, eyes wide, eyes narrowed. He uses his own face the way other painters use a mannequin, testing light, testing shadow, testing how fear looks different from surprise at the level of a single muscle. Over the course of his lifetime, he will produce more than 40 self-portraits. No other major painter of his era comes close. Scholars still argue about why. Practice, vanity, philosophical inquiry, probably all three. But there is one more reason that almost nobody talked about until recently. Canvas and panel cost money. A young painter with ambition and limited funds makes a practical calculation. You paint over things. You reuse what you have. By the time Rembrandt moves permanently to Amsterdam around 1631, he is already in the habit of burying one image beneath another. Quietly, deliberately, with no intention that anyone would ever look underneath. That habit is exactly what made 2011 possible. In 1628, Rembrandt van Rijn is 22 years old and already doing something no other painter in Leiden is doing. He is painting himself. Not out of vanity, out of necessity. The studio is small, the light controlled, the model always available. His own face costs nothing. And in a city where painters competed fiercely for commissions, a young artist needed proof. Proof that he could render shadow, that he understood the weight of a brow, that he could make skin look like it breathed. Self-portraits were calling cards. Rembrandt made them into laboratories. Between 1628 and 1633, he produces more than 24 known self-portraits. 24 in 5 years. That is not portraiture. That is obsession with a purpose. He paints himself laughing, grimacing, eyes wide, mouth open, raw, unflattering. In one early etching, he catches himself mid-expression, as though surprised by his own reflection. He is not performing for a patron. He is testing what a face can hold. The painter and art historian Ernst van Alphen has written about Rembrandt's self-portraits as a kind of ongoing interrogation, not of identity, but of representation itself. What does the eye do when light hits it from the left? What happens to the jaw when the mouth is slightly open? Rembrandt was not asking who he was. He was asking what paint could do. By 1632, he has moved permanently to Amsterdam, and the commissions are arriving. The anatomy lesson of Dr. Nicolaes Tulp makes him famous at 26. Suddenly, his face is not just a study tool. It is a recognizable face, a brand in the language of a later century. He keeps painting it anyway. Then comes 1633. That year, he produces a self-portrait that art historians would later describe as unusually composed, unusually formal. The angle of the head, the quality of the light falling across the left cheekbone, the particular way the eyes hold the viewer. It is a portrait of a man who knows he is being looked at, and who is looking back with complete control. That specific composition does not reappear in the known record after 1633. It seems to simply stop. No later version, no copies, no mention in correspondence. It disappears. Until something buried in a panel at the Getty Museum refuses, centuries later, to stay hidden. By the early 1640s, the money is getting complicated. Amsterdam has made Rembrandt rich, and then, gradually, has begun to take it back. The city outside his window on the Breestraat is still the wealthiest in Europe. The canals carry spices, silk, and silver from every direction. But inside the house, the ledgers are telling a different story. Rembrandt buys compulsively. Art, antiquities, weapons, curiosities, costumes for his models. The house itself, purchased in 1639 for 13,000 guilders, sits half-paid, accumulating interest. Panels and canvases cost money. So do pigments. Lead white alone was expensive enough that painters tracked it carefully. In a studio running on thinning credit, every surface that could be reused was reused. This was not unusual. It was not shameful. Across the workshops of Amsterdam and Leiden and Antwerp, painters scraped back dried paint, turned panels sideways, and began again on the reverse. Reuse was the economy of the craft. It always had been. Rembrandt was no different. X-ray studies conducted in the 20th century on paintings across his career had already revealed earlier compositions lurking beneath finished surfaces, a turned head here, a different hand position there. His studio produced work at volume, and volume demanded efficiency. You did not waste a prepared oak panel because a composition had not worked. You covered it. You moved on. What the science would eventually find beneath the Getty panel follows exactly this logic. A self-portrait. The scholars would later date the hidden image to around 1633, painted on a panel that was subsequently turned 90 degrees and covered with an entirely different composition. The buried face lies at a right angle to the painting above it. Not hidden out of shame, hidden out of economy. The panel was valuable. The earlier image was simply finished. A desperate pragmatism explains what centuries of darkness preserved, and what those centuries preserved, the right machine would eventually find. But before the machines arrived, something else happened. Something that sealed that buried face even deeper under the surface. Not just under paint, but under catastrophe. On the 14th of July, 1656, Rembrandt van Rijn formally petitioned for cessio bonorum, insolvency, before the Amsterdam court. He is 50 years old. He has been one of the most celebrated painters in Europe, and he is broke. The house on the Breestraat, the one he had never fully paid for, is gone. The collection, the armor, the busts, the Japanese weapons, the prints by Lucas van Leyden and Raphael and Mantegna that he had gathered over 2 decades, is inventoried, item by item, by court officials who walk through every room and write down what they see. The inventory runs to 4 pages. It is a detailed record of a life assembled and then disassembled in public. The auction of his possessions takes place in 1657 and 1658. The proceeds do not cover the debts. Rembrandt moves with his son Titus and his companion Hendrik Stoffels to a much smaller house in the Jordaan district, on the Rozengracht, a working-class neighborhood, quiet, reduced. The self-portraits from this period are among the most studied images in Western art. Scholars return to them because they are difficult to look at for long. The face is heavier now. The skin has the texture of something that has been weathered rather than aged. The eyes are still watching everything, but the watching has changed quality. Arnold Houbraken, writing in the early 18th century, described the late Rembrandt as someone who kept company mainly with common people and refused the society of the great. Whether that is biography or legend is hard to say. The face in the painting suggests something quieter than either. By 1656, the panel that holds the buried image is already more than 20 years old. The self-portrait beneath has been covered for perhaps 15 of those years. Now, above it, the paint of the finished work is hardening, darkening, settling into the oak. The buried face is not just hidden, it is sealed, layer upon layer, decade upon decade. Hendrik dies in 1663. Titus dies in 1668. Rembrandt follows in 1669, leaving behind an estate valued at almost nothing. And somewhere, in a collection that will pass through many hands over 3.5 centuries, a panel travels quietly through time with 2 faces inside it, and no one knows. 1968. A conservator at a European institution runs a routine X-ray over the surface of a small painted panel, the kind of examination that had become standard practice in post-war museum science. The room is unremarkable. The equipment is standard. No one expects anything unusual. The panel is dark. An old man with a beard, painted in the manner of Rembrandt's later years. Competent, quiet, the sort of work that gets catalogued and shelved without ceremony. But when the X-ray image develops, something surfaces from beneath the paint layer. A shape, a form. Something underneath the old man that is not the old man. The technology in 1968 is blunt. X-rays at that time could tell you that something was there, a density, a shadow, a ghost of a different composition, but they could not tell you what it was. They could not map pigments. They could not distinguish one buried color from another. The image is murky, ambiguous, a smear of gray beneath gray. The researchers note it, they write it down, they file it, and then they move on. This is not negligence. This is the ceiling of what the science could do. The ghost had been seen, technically, acknowledged, but it could not be read. It was like finding a locked room inside a house you thought you knew. You could press your ear to the door and hear nothing, and so you walked away and told yourself it probably didn't matter. 43 years pass. The panel continues its quiet life in a collection, passing through institutional hands, surviving moves and loans and conservation assessments. The 1968 note sits in a file somewhere. No one returns to it. No one has a reason to, because no one yet has the instrument that could make the ghost speak. What they needed did not exist yet. A machine that could fire X-rays across the entire surface of a painting, not in one beam, but in a scanning grid, atom by atom, pigment by pigment, and map every buried layer with the precision of a chemical fingerprint. A machine that could tell the difference between lead white and vermilion, between smalt and azurite, between a beard and a face that came before it. That machine was coming, but the painting would have to wait. In 2011, the panel travels. This is not a casual loan. This is a scientific expedition. A painting moved across borders with the specific intention of feeding it into instruments that most people will never see in their lifetimes. The facilities are enormous, deliberately so. Synchrotrons are particle accelerators built in rings hundreds of meters in diameter, designed to push electrons to near the speed of light and harvest the X-rays that spill off them. X-rays so intense, so focused, so controllable, that they can interrogate matter at the atomic level. The European Synchrotron Radiation Facility in Grenoble, France, occupies a building the size of a sports stadium. Brookhaven National Laboratory on Long Island sits inside a ring roughly half a kilometer across. These are not art conservation tools. They are physics infrastructure. And yet, here is Rembrandt's old man, brought to them like a patient arriving for a diagnosis. The technique is called macro X-ray fluorescence scanning, macro XRF. The principle is elegant. When X-rays strike an atom, they knock loose an inner electron. The atom, destabilized, emits its own X-ray to recover, and that emitted X-ray has a wavelength unique to that element. Mercury announces itself. Lead announces itself. Copper, iron, arsenic. Every element in every pigment raises its hand and says, "Here I am." Buried under 380 years of paint, but here. The researchers leading the study are Joris Dick of Delft University of Technology and Koen Janssens of the University of Antwerp. They have developed the scanning protocol specifically for paintings, a motorized grid that moves the X-ray beam across the surface, millimeter by millimeter, reading each point's elemental signature and building a map. A map not of what you can see, but of what is chemically present. Every layer, every revision, every buried decision. The scan of this panel takes 30 hours. 30 hours of continuous measurement, the beam moving back and forth in silence while the data accumulates. When it is finished, Dick and Janssens have a complete elemental map of the painting, not just the surface, but everything beneath it, separated by chemistry rather than by eye. They sit down to read what the machine has found. And there, underneath the pigments of the old man's face, the map begins to show something else entirely. A different arrangement of elements, a different distribution of lead and mercury, a different face, painted first, then covered. Not erased, covered. The ghost from 1968 was not an artifact. It was not a shadow or a fold in the ground layer. It was a person. In 2015, the same technology reaches a second painting. This one lives at the Getty Museum in Los Angeles. Another work attributed to Rembrandt. Another portrait of an older man. This one in military costume. Yvonne Safran, senior conservator of paintings at the Getty, brings macro XRF to bear on it with the same methodology that Dick and Janssens had refined. The Getty painting is well regarded. Confident brushwork, the characteristic pooling of shadow around the eyes, a gorget at the throat that catches light in the way Rembrandt understood better than almost anyone. It is, by any measure, a serious work. But Safran is not looking at the surface. She is looking through it. The scan takes its 30 hours. The beam moves. The elements speak. What the map reveals is a face beneath the old soldier's face, and this one is young. Pink skin tones built from vermilion and lead white, in proportions Rembrandt used in his early career before his palette darkened. A green cloak, layered in copper-based pigment. A different posture, a different person. Not a preliminary sketch, not a compositional study. A finished or near-finished portrait, painted over completely, the youth buried under the age that replaced it. Two paintings, two buried figures, both confirmed by the same elemental method at different institutions on different continents. This is no longer a single anomaly. This is a pattern. Rembrandt did this. He took panels he had already painted, panels with faces on them, faces he had made, faces that had cost him time and pigment and thought, and he painted over them. He covered earlier work with later work, earlier selves with older ones, without explanation, without record, without apparent concern that anyone would ever know. The question that has been building since 1968 is no longer whether something is hidden. The question is, who is underneath? What face came first? What Rembrandt decided, in some quiet Amsterdam afternoon, was worth burying? The answer was waiting in the data, and it was about to surface. Every day, visitors walk past him and keep walking. Underneath, Rembrandt is still watching.